Hello, welcome to A Layman Looks at the Word with Hal Richardson. We're continuing with our study of UFOs in the Bible, and this will be Lesson 3 in the series. Last time we talked about the pillar of fire, is the way we ended, that came out of heaven and led the people in the wilderness for over 40 years. Whether this fire was just directly from God or from one of God's UAPs or UFOs, not sure, the Bible doesn't say that, but it was something supernatural that we couldn't see. The government, since 2017, has revealed to us several things that they know about UFOs, or UAPs as they're called, things about the abductions and how people are burned during them, from the systems that make the ships function themselves, how many women got pregnant. It is a Luciferian thing, but we'll talk more about that later. The Red Sea parted. God led Israel from Egypt to the coast of the Red Sea, and you can see the pathway here. Today, in the Gulf of Aqaba, and the people camped on the beach of what today is Nuweiba. The Pharaoh and his army chased after them and caught up to them at the edge of the sea, wanting to kill them all. The Israelites were scared, told Moses that it would be better if they stayed in Egypt rather than to come into this wilderness and die. Moses tried to tell them to trust that God would save them, but they wouldn't have it. So Moses went to God. Exodus 14:15. And the Lord said unto Moses, Wherefore criest thou unto me? Speak to the children of Israel that they go forward. But lift up thy rod and stretch out thy hand over the sea and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And I, behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they will follow them. And I will get me honor upon Pharaoh, and upon his host, and upon his chariots, and upon his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gotten me honor upon the Pharaoh, and upon his chariots, and upon his horsemen. And the angel of God which went before the camp of Israel removed, and went behind them. And the pillar of the cloud went from before their face, and stood behind them. And it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel, and it was a cloud and darkness to them, but it gave light by night to these, so that one came not near the other all night. Verse 21, And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went in after them into the midst of the sea, even all the Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And it came to pass that in the morning watch the Lord looked on the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, and took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, Let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. And the Lord said unto Moses, Stretch out thy hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, and upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it. And the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea, and the waters returned and covered the chariots, the horsemen, and all the host of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. And there remained not as much as one of them. Verse 29, But the children of Israel walked upon dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. And Israel saw the great work which the Lord did upon the Egyptians. And the people feared the Lord, and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. In Nueva today, the place where the pillar of fire separated the Egyptians from Israel is melted sand from the great heat. Ron Wyatt also found a 30-foot granite pillar here, and on the other side of the Gulf of Aqaba, that were made by Solomon, with the story of the crossing of the Red Sea inscribed on it. The one mounted in Nueva has the inscription worn off from the waters of the Red Sea in which it was found. The other granite pillar is now in the hands of the government of Saudi Arabia. Nueva is shortened Arabic word which means where Moses parted the waters. I know that God's power is infinite, so whether it was angels using the ships of heaven or God's direct power, the miracles of the Exodus are all something that literally happened as written in the Holy Scriptures. The pillar of smoke and fire moved on the top of Mount Sinai, which is Jebel al-Lawz in Saudi Arabia, from which God gave the Ten Commandments. The top of that mountain is still darkened from that event. Moses had mentioned that God would send his angel to go before them. The angel sent to watch over Israel more than likely had ships to work from. We will see a detailed description of one of these ships when we read Ezekiel's event described next. A little out of order will be David's visions following Ezekiel, for David was while the great Israel monarchies were around before Ezekiel's time. I feel that the description of Ezekiel will be helpful to understand what David saw. Ezekiel's encounter with God. Background. Ezekiel was a prophet and a priest of God during the captivity of Israel and Judah. He was a contemporary of Daniel in the land of Babylon. Israelites had turned away from God and worshipped other gods in the lands that they were to conquer and inhabit. The kings of Israel and Judah reigned in the promised land for over 500 years. God warned them, but they did not come back to him. Then Israel was taken by Assyria, and later Judah by Babylon in 587 BC. Ezekiel was part of Judah and held captive in Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar. Ezekiel 1:1. Now it came to pass in the 30th year, in the 4th month, in the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river of Chebar, that the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. In the 5th day of the month, which is the 9th or the 5th year of King Jehoiakim's captivity, the word of the Lord came expressly unto Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Chebar, and the hand of the Lord was there upon him. And I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and fire enfolding in itself, and a brightness was about it, and out of the midst thereof is the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire. Also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man, and every one had 4 faces, and every one had 4 wings, and their feet were straight feet, like the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like the color of burnished brass. And they had the hands of a man under their wings on their 4 sides, and they 4 had their faces in their wings, and their wings were joined one to another. And they turned not when they went, and they went every one straight forward. And as for the likeness of their faces, the 4 had the face of a man, and the face of a lion on the right side, and they 4 had the face of an ox on the left side, and the 4 also had the face of an eagle. Thus were their faces, and their wings were stretched upward, 2 wings of every one were joined to another, and the 2 they covered their bodies. They went every one straight forward. Whither the Spirit was to go, they went, and they turned not when they went. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, and like the appearance of lamps. It went up and down among the living creatures, and the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning, and the living creatures ran and returned as the appearance of a flash of lightning. Now as I beheld the creatures, behold, one wheel upon the earth by the living creatures with its 4 faces. The appearance of the wheels and their work was like unto the color of beryl, and the 4 had one likeness, and their appearance and their work was as it was a wheel within the middle of a wheel. And when they went upon their 4 sides, and they turned not when they went. And as far as their rings, they were so high that they were dreadful, and their rings were full of eyes round about them, the 4 of them. When the living creatures went, the wheels went with them, and when the living creatures were lifted up, the earth, the wheels were lifted up with them. Whithersoever the Spirit was to go, they went. Thither was their spirit to go, as the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. And when those went, these went, and when those stood, these stood. And when those were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. And the likeness of the firmament upon the heads of the living creature was the color of terrible crystal, stretched forth over their heads above. And under the firmament were their wings straight, the one toward the other. Every one had 2, which covered on his side, and every one had 2, which covered on that side of their bodies. And when they went, I heard the noise of their wings like the noise of great waters, as the voice of the Almighty, the voice of speech, as is the noise of a host. And when they stood, they let down their wings. And when there was a voice from the firmament that was over their heads, when they stood, and had let down their wings. Well, no doubt we're not going to be able to hear the voice or see what the voice had to say this time. We will continue that next time. But no doubt this is a ship, a heavenly ship, and he is going to hear and talk with the King of the universe. This is Hal Richardson. If you don't know the Lord Jesus Christ today as your Lord and Savior, I invite you to ask him into your life. He is the way, the truth, and the life, and the only way to God in heaven, by his own words, and proved it by raising from the dead. See me next time, and we'll continue with our series on UFOs in the Bible. This is Hal Richardson. Bye for now.